thank you very much for your keynote, and I have a few questions I just wrote down for Dr. Krebber and for Charles Vaillant. Dr. Krebber, who is the CEO of the German energy company RWE, and Charles Vaillant, who is the CTO and CDO of MANN+HUMMEL, which is a German family-owned business, which specializes in filters. Thank you for joining us up here on stage. I basically have 3 strategic questions, and then we can go into the nitty-gritty details. But what does European strategic sovereignty imply for you at the moment? What are the most important key aspects when we talk about this?
You asked the question in the European point of view. I think it's crucial that we do 2 things, that we protect and promote. And let's start with promote. I think that first thing which is very important is that we are not dependent on crucial materials or, for instance, energy, or that we can have our own economy and are not too dependent of other countries. And the situation at this moment makes it that I do not have to explain myself further. So we have to be very aware of what our key is to our economy, our health economy, the health of our economy. And so we have to promote what is essential for us. And that's why I mentioned the semiconductor value chain, because I think that's crucial for what we need today in the basic of our economy. That's one side of the picture. And the other one is that we need to protect, we need to protect what is crucial and essential for us with regard to these basic elements of our economy, but also what is a risk for our security.
And what is crucial and essential, I'd like to go into more detail later on during this discussion, but what is your perception?
When we talk about sovereignty, we need to talk, it's obvious, about energy supply. And I think we need to learn the very hard lessons, that we were primarily dependent on one supplier. And that is a very unpleasant situation currently. And I think that should not happen again. But when we look into its sovereignty, we need to talk about dependency. It's not so much the question who supplies, but the question of the energy infrastructure. Because when we have import infrastructure like our neighbors have, you are not dependent from one supplier. So it's very urgent that we build the LNG infrastructure, but we also need to think through how we build the import infrastructure for the green world, for green molecules, because Europe will always be dependent on supplies. We don't have enough space to produce all the green electrons and molecules. And I think that is the task of the hour, to get Europe ready to be not dependent again on any individual supplier.
Hydrogen was mentioned today a few times, and the thought that crossed my mind was, how independent or how diverse can we become with regards to hydrogen? Or, how big are the dangers that we could run into difficulties in this area with regards to dependency?
The biggest challenge I see in hydrogen is when you look into the, let's say, target picture, it's totally clear that most of the molecules need to be imported. Because we probably need all the renewables in Europe, or most of it, to produce green electrons. But the question is now, how do we synchronize the investment cycle of the energy-intensive industry with the availability of hydrogen? And that means in the beginning we probably need to produce locally, but we also need to be a bit more flexible. We discussed it this morning already on blue hydrogen, but in the end we need to build also the import infrastructure. So it will not be about dependency. But when you look at the regions who could supply to Europe, I don't fear that we get dependencies, but we need the infrastructure which makes us independent, so not being at the end of only one pipeline.
Our finance minister said he would even take red hydrogen. It's kind of a color game we had this morning, or this, around noon. What are your thoughts on European sovereignty and the necessities?
Yeah, so when we look at Europe being a very large market, similar to the United States, and quite a decent size compared to China. The challenge of Europe is the fact that you have a multitude of countries, different languages, different situation that maybe prevent some of the innovation to take place. So we need to provide the right framework to enable partnership, collaboration, be able to find a way to pool resources, brains, and financing together to to work on solutions. So you talked about hydrogen, and there is some good programs in Europe, like Horizon program that currently is financing a lot of research at the European level to develop new type of hydrogen solutions.
Because you just mentioned a couple of issues, I was wondering, is brain drain one of your concerns right now, also due to the geopolitical developments in Europe?
I would maybe before I go to brain drain, I think just talent acquisition is a tremendous. We've been suffering, and this is not just over here, but the United States and in Asia about access to talent, specifically on digitalization, and we may talk about this in a few minutes. There's just not enough supply in the market to fuel the project, the activity that we want to do. In terms of a brain drain, for me, Europe is the heart of innovation, and has been. If you look for the last 400 years, the best world innovations have been coming from Europe, starting with Holland in the 1600s, that make them a great world power at the time, and even today, when you look at some of the high-tech company in the United States, most of the founders are Europeans. So I think Europe has this creativity, innovation, brain power that is accessible over here, that we need to find a way to convert, retain, to develop that locally.
But we need to keep it that way, and we need to be able to finance the innovations, right? Which is a big issue, I think, especially also when it comes to green innovation in this area. When I introduced you on stage, I mentioned the strategic plan the Netherlands has to become independent from raw materials by 2050, and I was wondering, how will that work? How will you do that? And I think a few others might be interested in that as well. If you could give us some real-life details to that plan.
Well, first of all, you have to give words to this ambition. So just saying it gives some kind of movement already. So that's what politics is about. So we say we want to be, we have this circular ambition in 2050, but we also want to be climate neutral in 2050. And we have this step in between in 2030. I think we all have that in mind. What we want to do is I think we need Europe very much. Everything is going together now. We need Europe in this, because the regulation is not helping us right now. It comes from somewhere, but we need to go somewhere else. So we have to change. For instance, you should use the rest, what is left of a process, what the leftovers of a process with regard to plastics. You should use that again. We should make it possible, which is just a small example. So we have to look at all the regulation, and we have to look at the value chains and see what limitations are there. And what we see is that we have these intense conversations with our companies, and we talk with them. For instance, the big companies, they make plans on circular, they make plans on carbon decrease, etc., etc. And then we try to work together in making these obstacles go away, which will take some time. But we're working on that and going the same path, which is essential.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see all the effort that has gone into this idea ever since it was promoted a bit more a couple of years ago as well. When I think about innovation, of course, I believe we cannot talk about innovation without talking about energy and energy supply. So how dangerous is the current situation for Europe as being an innovative region? The bottlenecks that we assume will continue, and in this regard, we all would be interested in your perception of the current situation.
That has two aspects. One is, what are the costs of energy for the next 5-10 years in Europe, which will, of course, determine where industries will locate. And the other one is, the technology itself. Where does it come from? So the technology we apply for wind, solar, electrolyzers, batteries. Let's talk about the first thing first. I think currently we have the big risk that we have a competitive disadvantage, especially towards North America, for the next decade to come when it comes to energy prices. Because the old model is totally broken. The old model was we could get cheap energy supply from Russia, I mean, the US were independent anyhow, and parts of Asia needs to pay very high energy prices. Now the balance has changed. Europe and Asia pays very high energy prices, and North America has an advantage. And that's the question how we bridge it. I mean, we want to get into the green energy world. We have the advantage, and that's really an advantage, that the typical conflicts we had, the conflicts between affordability, sustainability, and security of supply in the old fossil world is over. I mean, when you compare the green world to the current price levels, it's cheaper, it's sustainable, and it's more independent. But we need, for certain industries, we need support to bridge from the currently very high energy price level to, and that needs to be an open discussion, because there is a huge bill to be paid by Europe for the current situation and how to get out of it. And there is a big risk that we see collateral damage for our industries there. Now, on the other part, on technology, we lost the solar industry already in Europe. I mean, currently 85% of solar panels have their origin in China. Our biggest solar market is the US, where we build solar plants for certain regions. I mean, Europe should pick up, we are optimistic about it, but it's already today, due to the geopolitical tensions, very difficult to get these panels into the US. And then there is the aspect that people, when you build renewables, they ask you about what is in for us as a region. I mean, we call it local content. So, and when you look at that most of the supply comes from Asia, but people here in Europe, but also the US, ask what is in for me. And we talk about a growing industry. There is a huge opportunity for Europe to get part of the production back if we get it right. But what we need is a European framework. We have different requirements for local contents in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Poland. In Germany, there are none, interestingly. And if we get that framework right, and it is stable for a long time, we can, together with our suppliers, discuss where they should set up their manufacturing capacities.
Do you believe right now that, if you were to set up a new energy-intensive business, innovative business, would you take it to Europe?
I mean, look what we have seen. I mean, battery production coming to Europe, semiconductors coming to Europe. But what is also clear, all these decisions were based on a clear, let's call it support framework. They all get support because you need to bridge from the current very high energy price. And I think that was discussed this morning. I mean, we should not lock in this support forever. It needs to be clearly on a downward trend. Because if we are successful in rebuilding our energy supply system, then we're going to get to a cheaper cost level. So we talk about maybe 5-10 years.
Mr. Vaillant, how do you deal with all these challenges within your company? The energy challenge, the innovation challenge, the uncertain geopolitical developments, which all have an impact on innovation right now.
I think the current situation with energy, I think just like everybody else, try to mitigate as much as possible. But since we are in the filtration and separation area, we are doing currently a lot of research on supporting that transition. Looking at anything from renewable energy, hydrogen, battery storage, and so on and so forth. And there is great opportunity for that. Specifically, when you looked at, you mentioned recycle and circular economy, there's currently a lot of work being done to convert old materials to bring them back and bring them back into production. Typically, it's more expensive, and that has been a problem. But we start to see some instances where by changing the production process, changing the temperature of the tool and so on, you can actually start to produce product at a cheaper price point. Now, those are the few examples that are coming, but that's actually really exciting. So, that's the area that we're looking at. We're looking at using waste material. We're looking at developing some type of organic material instead of precious metal for some type of battery storage, for example. Because if we can use organic material, we have access to pulp and paper mills everywhere in the world, especially close to us, and that would enable us some of the supply that we would require for those energies.
That's what I was just reflecting on while you were talking. Where are they getting all the raw materials from? And how independent can you become?
So I can give you the one example that we are currently looking into is supporting pulp and paper industry to convert a waste material that they generate when they produce paper, the so-called black liquor, and they convert the black liquor into lignin, and with the lignin, the organic matter into the lignin enable you to create materials. It's very difficult to do it. So we were asked by those producers to develop new type of filtration, new type of ceramic type filtration that were developed specifically to enable them to do this. Now it's still at the research state, but it's pretty started to be pretty promising on the result that we see.
Where are they located?
Just south of Germany.
South of Germany.
Southeast of Germany.
All right. This morning we had a security expert here on one of the panels, and the question I'm taking, from this panel to you is, how can Europe begin to think more strategically about all these issues, and how can Europe begin to think like a geopolitical influence or power? How much power do we actually have?
I think we have a lot of power, and we have proven that the last months. I mean, the invasion of Russia in Ukraine was in the end of February, 24th, I believe. And as you see where we are now, we have six packages of sanctions, and we are in this together. And these were not easy decisions. So what we learned is that we can make decisions fast if we are aware that it is urgent and we need to do it. So I think we can have some confidence and trust that if we keep this attitude that we're in this together, and that together really, it's like something easy to say but not easy to do, that we're stronger together. And it is so. I think Europe has a lot of potential to be even bigger and of more importance in the geopolitical field. So we can go from there. And as you look at the last years, what we've done in the European Union, we have built a lot of strategy elements. Like, for instance, we did it with the CHIPS Act, which is really something new, that we dare to say we believe this industry is vital for our European countries. And we did it, and I say we're going to put the money where our mouth is. So we're going to invest to make Europe stronger, which is, I think, really a big choice and changing point.
I was assuming that you would say that Europe has a lot of power to act as a geopolitical player. When I look upon it from a journalistic perspective, I would always think we're somewhere in a sandwich still between the US and between China. And what we also learned this morning is that Russia, through the sanctions, has not been as isolated as many politicians would like us to believe. And I do feel it might be a big challenge to keep Europe together and united. How are you going to, deal with this challenge?
The Netherlands is just one of the countries, and Germany is a bigger brother in this playing field. And I think that in this connection, we should try to find out where we can strengthen this power within Europe. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today, because I believe in this partnership. And we have to look to these partnerships which make Europe stronger, but because there's a lot of variety, as you know, within the European Union. But if we build coalitions together, then I think we really can come somewhere. Yes.
What do you believe it would take to become more resilient in these times for companies or international companies?
You mean in general, or on the energy side?
On the energy side, and also on the supply chain side, which is a huge issue as well.
I mean, let's talk about the current situation. I mean, because we discussed sanctions already, and I think we need to be clear that besides the horrible war in Ukraine, we are in the midst of an economic war with Russia. I mean, we are sanctioning them, they are sanctioning us, and that has huge implications on energy supply, but also on supply chains. I mean, global food supply and others. But coming to the energy point, I mean, I think nobody was naive and nobody should have expected that Russia will observe how we get independent from their energy supply, and in the meantime they simply deliver what is still missing to get that. So where we are in, it's not a surprise. And I think it's exactly the right thing when we talk about resilience, that we need to think through how we can even deal with a worsening situation in the next 2 years to come until we get the independence. So I think the European nations are taking the right steps. I mean, both countries have decided to bring back coal. It's not nice from an environmental point of view, but we need to save all gas in the power sector, which is possible. Build LNG infrastructure. We bring in FSRUs. We build terminals. The Netherlands is upgrading their import capacity. But of course, we also need to think through what is the economic impact of that, because picking up the bill is also a question we need to answer. I mean, we don't want to see companies going bankrupt, losing industries, and the question is, how do we socialize the losses from the missing energy supply from Russia? Is it a taxpayer's question? Is it a gas off-taker's question? And I think these questions will emerge pretty soon. One thing I would ask for is more European coordination. Because currently, I mean, every national country is looking at their emergency plan, so we have a very good understanding how, at least procedural-wise, it would go, how we distribute the remaining gas. But there is currently, on European level, no decision how much gas will come from the Netherlands and France and Belgium to Germany if we are fully cut off from Russian supplies, and how much gas we need to let go through to Austria, Czech Republic and Hungary. Nobody is addressing this more critical question than national emergency plans. And I think we have maybe 2-3 months to sort that out.
That's not a very long time. Are you optimistic that we will find a solution?
I think I should refer that question to you. It's a political question.
Well, you know, I assume you are involved with many talks with politicians right now, behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think it's simple, because we are committed to each other, and we have this agreement on the solidarity with regard to gas. And but I think it's essential what you mentioned, that we should monitor it more strictly. We should be more transparent about how the situation is in every country, what we do to limit our energy use, because you need to do some efforts to make it work, to make it possible to go with to use less gas. So yeah, I think we have a lot to do still, but I have some confidence. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting also, you know, how the companies deal with it. So do you have examples what happens in your company in order to reduce the use of energy? How much room do you have for maneuver?
Well, I think there is some room for improvement. Thanks to new technology in terms of sensors and digitalization, we see that, you know, there is a lot of waste that exists today. We just didn't know how much it was until we started to monitoring assets. So I think the current situation is forcing us to even accelerate those type of energy monitoring solutions and to find remediation. The good thing about this, if there is a good thing, it is really also force us to accelerate our reduction of carbon emissions as well, because the two are linked together. We work in the filtration business, so involved in HVAC systems, and we see, and this is not just in Europe, but North America or Asia, just the amount of excessive energy that is being done because the systems are not very smart. So as we start to roll out more and more digitalization, thanks to reduction of cost, speed of computation and the like, we can really start to make sure, one, people are safe in buildings, second, at the lowest price possible. And that can be done for an office building, that can be done for a school, that can be done for a factory.
Dr. Krebber, I have to come back to your point that we have 2-3 months left to sort this out, you know, which probably sends a lot of people sitting up straight in their chairs right now. This morning, I kind of asked into the room, who expects that we will be confronted with the situation that we get no gas from Russia, not just less, but no. And quite a lot of hands went up straight to the air. Is that the scenario that you are expecting? And if so, when?
I think there's no value in speculation. I think it needs. The question is about preparation. What the likelihood is, whether it's 5% or 95%, it doesn't matter. I think the risk is so imminent that we need to get prepared. But I don't want to speculate about probabilities. It also will depend on how the war will continue. The horrible war in Ukraine and the economic war. Do we see an escalation, a standstill, or even a de-escalation? I mean, I don't know. It's totally open, I think. But I would not rule out a further escalation.
So in order to prepare, do you think we should go back to using nuclear energy? I promised on one of the panels this morning that I would be handing over this question to you as well.
I give you a very honest answer. The Netherlands still run one nuclear plant where we have a huge participation. Currently, it's planned to be decommissioned in the second half of the 20s. I think it's exactly the right question to discuss whether we should extend it. And we have enough time to discuss it because it's still 5 years to go. I think that is also the answer to the German question. It is the right question, but unfortunately it's too late.
And where do you see energy prices heading before I ask him how the companies deal with those?
Currently, I mean, the gas price is obvious, the oil price is obvious, the power price depend currently on the gas price and the CO2 price. I would expect, if nothing changes in terms of market design, there are big discussions whether we should take out the marginal gas plant in price formation. It's a market design question which will take some time. I would expect that the prices will more or less stay at the current level until we see a de-escalation of the situation in Ukraine and following also de-escalation on the economic side. In the economic war side, so the sanctioning.
And how long can companies take these high energy prices and costs?
Well, when we see the increase that we have in Europe, you cannot survive very long without finding a way to passing some of those costs to the market. So for sure, we have drastic programs to reduce our costs, to figure out solutions to reduce energy. The example I gave earlier, and I think that's that's where we are currently. But at the same time, we need to continue to work on innovation technology. So you cannot stop those programs. I mean, you need to protect your future. You need to work on digitalization. We heard earlier in the panel, this is not cheap. So it's actually a pretty complex maze that we have to navigate. And so it's a real combination of reducing our costs, having to pass pricing to the market, and then be very selective on strategic projects to make sure we protect our future, but only to the extent that we can afford it.
So when we talk about technical innovations and digitization, of course, you also need raw materials. And one of the questions in these months and weeks and days is, what do we learn from the experience with Russia for our future relations with China? From your perspective, how important is China for innovations in Europe? And how far should the exchange, the know-how exchange, for example, go? Or where do you see red lines now?
Yeah, the world is changing. If you would have asked me that question just a couple of years ago, I probably can give you a clear answer. Today, it's very nebulous where we are. We are present in China. We are producing. We just opened a digital hub in China, in Shanghai. We have a partner in Shenzhen. We have people on the ground there. So the Chinese market is so large that, especially for a German company, we have to be present there. But some of the tide is turning, or seems to be turning. Your IP strategy, we have a lot of discussion about IP strategy with China. Data access in China. As we do digitalization, the Chinese government is changing the rules about who can own and where you place those data and who can even access this data. In some cases, if you're not a Chinese citizen, you don't even have access to the data altogether. So you can't even run operation remotely from Germany or some other places. So I don't have a good answer for you, but things are changing and we're looking at as we're speaking.
A few years ago, I would like to raise the question, does it matter where you store the data and where the servers are located? And people would smile at me and say, no, it's okay, they can be anywhere, China, India, whatever. Since you just mentioned data, where do you prefer to store your sensitive data now?
Yeah, so personally, I don't have a preference. Of course, we need to make sure data protection and cybersecurity is in place. I think if you work with any of the large data storage company, either the Americans, the Europeans, I think things are pretty safe. So I don't have a problem where the servers are. I think it's really dependent about the regulation into the market and also the demand from the market. So specifically in Europe, there is a strong affinity from our customers, from the consumers, to make sure the data reside in Europe. But that's things that we can accommodate.
And the last question goes to Minister Adriaansens. I was listening, of course, like all of us, to your speech earlier. And when you were talking about like-minded countries and cooperation and innovation, you mentioned the US, you mentioned Taiwan, you mentioned South Korea, you did not mention China.
I really thought very good about the words I was saying there. But I also said that I believe in an open economy. But on the other hand, we should not be naive. So cooperation or collaboration with China or certain companies there is a possibility, but you have to be very aware what your values are with regard to this product or process and what the risks are, et cetera, et cetera. So we are open for, China is an important country to be connected with. We have a lot of Chinese students coming to the Dutch universities. And for the youngers, it's very good that they connect. And this innovation starts there. So it would not be very wise to shut it down. But we should not be naive and look into the risk also. So we have to be careful. Yeah.
Perfect ending for our panel. Thank you very much to all of you. Have a good day.